Special Operations Training Detachment, SOD West, Burrow Team. Coming at you from NTC, Off the Radar.
This is Off the Radar. I'm Captain Weston Rich, an observer coach trainer for the Green Berets at the National Training Center. Welcome back to the fourth and final part of our conversation with retired Colonels Tom Vogel and Kelly Smith. In this episode, we will discuss where on the battlefield Army Special Operation Forces could be, differences and similarities between the National Training Center and Joint Readiness Training Center, and the value of training at a CTC. At the AOB, when you're initially, probably in the first day or two when you're talking about, hey, how's the AOB fitting in this whole large-scale combat operations thing, is there conversations about time and space and what that battlefield geometry looks like? Where does the AOB headquarters need to go? Where does this civil affairs team, like their left and right limits, this tactical PSYOP detachment, if the whole detachment's here? I think that the ODAs are pretty clear. Everyone kind of understands, to your point, Tom, about deep and extended deep, like they're going to be in front of the conventional force in a significant way with a partner doing things. But is that the right place for civil affairs or PSYOP or any other enabler that the AOB might have? What do those conversations look like from your perspective?
Well, I think that we've got to be careful that we presume what we do is at the exclusion of other options that are could be equally as valid. What the right thing is that's been decided between, the high con on the soft side and the 52nd ID, which serves that role for this fight for the brigade training unit, is that's what's been decided as the appropriate place. But I think you could make it a valid argument that what if the best partnered role for the ODA was in the rear area, getting rid of insurgent threats to BCT and division operations. Yeah. And it would be perfectly valid to say, I have an ODA doing partnered irregular warfare as a warrior that never went to the FLOT or forward of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's my first caution statement is the collective decision of what the right thing to do doesn't mean that there aren't other options that would be valid. So we play the cards as they're dealt for the AOB and coach them to play them as they're dealt. And part of it is a recognition that we're also trying to maximize the training value of the time that they spend here. So although operationally, if you looked at the scenario and said, I want to fight this war, and there could be course of action 1, course of action 2, courses of action 3 that are all valid for employment of my force, regardless of which RSOF tribe it's from, I might have to tip the scales in my evaluation of those courses of action to the one that also gives me the best training benefit. So we see that there's great training benefit in putting the ODAs forward, maximizing their warrior training, that the things that Tom were just talking about, partnering it in a way so that they get the benefit of training with a partner because we think they're going to get the best return on investment for the training time for that, even if it's maybe slightly bent from another alternative that would make operational sense but would have less training value. I think the same early discussion we had about PSYOPs and the delegation of authorities and so forth, and I made my fundamental point is that the risk calculus from the CJTF commander on down is all going to be somewhat balanced, right? What we can do with fires and kinetic effects is going to be somehow balanced with what we do with non-lethal effects. Mm-hmm. But we might take some stretches and some liberties with some of those authorities because if we don't do that, we miss an opportunity to do some training, right? So we might accelerate certain pieces of that purely purely for the benefit of giving training opportunity.
Yeah.
I think some of that happens on the sensitive activity side, and I think some of that also happens on the civil affairs side, where what we're trying to do is build together a patchwork of a reasonable enough, a sufficiently sensical warfighting scenario that concurrently maximizes the opportunity for us to train at these things. And so, although we draw conclusions about the extended deep and whether the target should be integrated air defense systems or long-range precision fires, it could just as easily be valid to say I want to try to capture enemy division commander or protect critical infrastructure in the capital, or like there's a whole bunch of options out there. I think we've just built through experience and time and repetition the scenario at NTC that makes sufficiently sound tactical and operational sense while also optimizing the training opportunity for our formations.
Okay. Anything to add, Tom? You don't have to add anything.
I think I guess I'd just also say, I think in some ways that we, the nature of the force, we also pick some scenarios where we're naturally disadvantaged, I think. One of the things I think that also makes Army Special Operations Forces unique is the presence on the battlefield from phase 0 through phase 5, or from pre-conflict for probably a number of years until we're putting the country back together, and so here we're starting in the dominate phase, really. We're trying to deter, but that's already gone, know. So seize the initiative and dominate, so, and we're kind of doing so as if we were never there before. Not
in a long extended period of there are, the AOB gets an op order and gets a bunch of other things, so they understand the road to war, and they have some products and stuff to go off of. But
I'm saying maybe without our own infrastructure that we might have had the opportunity to develop, or relationships in the extended deep that you could leverage.
Fair. And some of that is left to Kelly's point, training value for various entities that come here, whether they're from 4th Battalion or whatever they may be. But since you both have an experience at the National Training Center and the Joint Readiness Training Center, what are the differences and similarities between the two, and which do you prefer? You don't have to answer the preferred part, but what are the differences between and the similarities?
I'll go topical, and maybe you could get deeper there, Kelly. So one of them is length of time. Over here, you better be 16 days, I think, versus about 23, and you better hit the ground running here at Fort Irwin, because you don't have time for the planning phase to really sort yourself out. I think that's significant. Terrain matters. I'm not sure how much it matters, but yeah, there's a difference between this kind of armor maneuver, in artillery fight we have here versus the terrain at Fort Johnston kind of lends itself more towards a light infantry, wooded terrain. Those are the topical ones. Let me give it over to Kelly. You might have some deeper thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think the other one, the population of the civilians on the battlefield that's pretty much omnipresent at Fort Johnson and JRTC gives opportunities and challenges. All of these knives cut both ways for sure. I do believe that for sure some of the terrain and weather at Fort Johnson is austere and arduous. But I think the nature of the environment here, which is a combination of harshness and also latitude to kind of move where you want to, but all of those choices have consequences, is a little more flexible at Fort Irwin than it is at Fort Johnson. I mean, I think the things you can do there, the consequence choices of them are pretty clear cut, right, between the woods and the roads.
Yeah, but in general, they're faced with the same sort of scenario.
Yeah, well, and I think that's part of the thing, right? Is the fundamental discussion is how do you train an AOB, and you train an AOB by putting a degree of complexity on it and force it to solve through that and communicate to someone that they don't have right with them. And I think that part is fairly agnostic about what the geography is.
Mm-hmm.
That's my opinion of it anyway.
Okay, so both excellent training venues.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you were back on active duty as a group commander, would you be encouraging AOBs and detachments to come out to the CTCs?
No, I would not, because it would be mandated. I think encouragement is too short of a word. I think that we also touched on it in the sense that as the dwell to deployment ratio adjusts, and I know that ebbs and flows. Certainly, I'm not being naive to the fact that all of the theaters have more requirements and desires for the groups than the groups in the TSOCs can meet.
Mm-hmm.
But as you look at that balance, if in the rotational design I had the opportunity to send an AOB, I would sign them up for it. Because I think there's no denser opportunity for them to go as far in their progression as a formation as they would get here. And I don't think there's a lot of debate. I haven't heard anybody debate against that, to be honest with you, in the time that I've been affiliated with this.
I wish I paid more emphasis to it when I was in the seat.
Mm-hmm.
I did come out here, visit companies and teams on, I think, 3 occasions. But it was one of those things that was just kind of on the schedule,
Yeah.
Whereas I agree that word density is really great. Now that having gone and seen a few rotations here from the other side, I really believe that whether it's collective training or individual occupational skill training, in 2 to 3 weeks, no matter what CTC you go to, you're getting about 6 months worth of training. I mean, you're getting repetitions in, whether you're the intelligence sergeant or the operations sergeant or anyone on the staff. You're getting so many different experiences, and it's maybe about 338 hours here, of training that turns you into an expert. Adds on to that Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours, but I think it is, the training environment here is denser. You have a lot of learning. And let's face it, even when I think back I can very clearly remember my times here when I came here as a lieutenant colonel and a lieutenant, and I remember the lessons that I learned. And I can't necessarily say that for every 6 months of my career when I'm like, oh, yeah, I really had a valuable, experience when I was an anti-armor platoon leader. I really learned, but you remember those crystallized things here. So I would, would it be mandated? Absolutely. There'd be a lot more emphasis on it. And I think it's also worth noting, you can see by performance here which chains of command have made it an emphasis. Now, that's not a judgment call, because I know that the formations are very busy and there might be theater requirements that hey, just this one is not my number one priority, So I'm not trying to, say it should be, but it should be part of the repertoire. Yeah. The other advantages here, the learning that one can take back to the organization is huge. So even if your company does not have the opportunity to come here, your company has an opportunity to raise the level and the quality of pretty much everybody else inside your group. Mm-hmm. The lessons are that important, and I think the after action review process here that you've seen quite a few now.
Yeah.
It really helps you to see yourself and helps you to see a potential enemy that you might face in the future. And the next part is seeing the terrain where you're going to be fighting, and that from your AOR. So for all those reasons, I'd emphasize this place.
And here's a thought experiment that I put myself through to answer that question, right? So imagine you're in that seat, and now you have a conflict somewhere in the world in your group's AOR. Mm-hmm. And we're breaking the glass. It's time to go to war. And as the TIB fit is being generated, you got one company that's the first company going on the plane over that's going to start this thing. Sure, there's going to be another company and a battalion headquarters, and eventually we'll build and build and build and build. But something's going first. And you look across your formation and you have companies that have done home station training, some companies that have done CPXs, some companies that have done this, and you have one company that's fresh off the railhead from coming back from a CTC. Who are you assessing is best prepared to do your first in, no rip TOA, open this theater, and start this let's go fight with a conventional partner?
Yeah.
And I think that for sure part of leadership is the human domain, right? And leaders know their subordinates and we expect them to make that judgment. But assuming that part of it is a wash, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a group commander that wouldn't say that, oh, this unit fresh from CTCs is best prepared to do this theater opening task for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the awareness is out there. I think that senior leaders across USASOC are really not to the point of mandating it, but that they're really enforcing or encouraging and doing things that open group commanders and battalion commanders perspective on it, and that the tide is changing from years ago. Now we do have pre-command lieutenant colonels coming out here as part of their pre-command course, they come and they tour a CTC between JRTC and NTC. And we've had a couple iterations of that now, and it seems like they're getting a lot of good feedback from a 3-day trip out here where they interact with the AOB, ODAs, whatever foreign forces we might have, and then the conventional unit as well. So what would you do as a group commander for training guidance for that unit to come out here, for that AOB and those teams to come out here to a CTC?
I think there's an instinct that would start to say something like, oh, separate yourself from distraction and do CPXs and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's candidly unrealistic, right? We recognize how busy the formation is. So I go back to some of my earlier things, which are, what are the low cost, high return on investment things, which are, let's get smart about some of the things that are not organic to you. Let's focus on this expeditionary mindset of what problems am I encountering because I don't have somebody that I'm replacing, and just at least have a recognition for those. And if there's something I can do to prepare myself organically, I would say that's probably the start point. For sure, if you had a blank training calendar, which no one's seen, I mean, in 30 years in the Army, I never saw a blank training calendar, right? Like we talk about white space, we talk about it, we seek it out, we seldom find it to the degree that we want it. So that's a reality. So I would just focus on, hey, let's get these high return on investment things. Let's get our mindset in the right space, and then let's come together and form a team and go through the process. And there's nothing new under the sun in some ways, because the Army has written how to do this. And if we avail of ourselves to those doctrinal tools and modify them from an informed decision, an informed rationale, as opposed to because we were ignorant of them, I think we'll be in a good spot.
Yeah, I think, my guidance along the same lines, but I think I'll just throw it out more broadly because it's going to be different for every company that comes here based upon where they are. First off, here at the goal is not to beat Geronimo or Black Horse. Mm-hmm. The goal is to come out of here with as much learning as you can for the time that you're here. I mean, the amazing thing about the CTCs is when you're here, it takes as much time to be good at something as bad at something, in a way, So if you can do any pre-work to maximize your learning here, I think it is the low-hanging fruit, I mean, like even some rehearsals with your company on, hey, this is how I think we're going to run an operations center. Let's go review. Maybe it's not MDMP, but maybe it's, it's planning products and warfighting products. And I think even some simple discussions between the command team with commanders, it would pay off dividends, frank discussions on that. So whatever it might be to maximize the training that you're going to get out of it, so do the low hanging stuff. Have the discussions with commanders, because shortly after getting here, you're going to have 2 or 3 days of FaceTime, and then it's going to be really, really hard for you to have thought-producing conversations with them over a high-frequency radio, you know. So, I don't know. Hopefully that answers your question.
No, I appreciate the answers, and thank you for your time, gentlemen. We had a long conversation covering a wide range of topics, mostly focused on what RSOF, Army Special Operations, does at the combat training centers with our large-scale combat operations scenario. Touched on things like doctrine and multi-domain operations, how AOB staffs really get after, the commander's intent, and how does that commander package up that intent and send it out to his downtrace units. Talking about risk and authorities and where control for certain things might lie, and synchronizing efforts between the Special Operations Forces and the Conventional Force. And then, talked about how important combat training centers are. So if you haven't been to one, definitely try to come out and get that on your calendar. They're great. I'm partial to NTC just because that's where I work. But, hey, I will let you guys give your final thoughts. And if you do have any recommended reading or anything that you think is worth discussing, you can feel free to talk about that as well. Because Tom, you mentioned Max Gladwell and some other things kind of on the fringes during this conversation, but hey, you were a commander once. I bet you had a reading list. So
I saw the recent Army reading list. There's things. There's some great books on that. Kill chain is interesting. I'll mention that only because we didn't really talk about a digital kill chain, which normally translates into a FATED system, and how well that tends to talk between a SOCOM platform and a FORCECOM platform.
That'd be not very well.
Not very well. And just to tell a little war story, it's a consistent problem. When we went into, we were both part of the invasion into Iraq, and our by design, special operations systems are meant for more of a international connection. So, we didn't have CPOF or TigerNet or these various things that developed within a few years, and we had trouble communicating with the conventional forces. Those issues still exist today, and you could actually hear about them off of the Army reading list. I think General George's reading list is Red Platoon. You could hear about communications mismatches in there between Air Force systems and Army systems. So it's always an issue. I didn't mean to go down into that, but the kill chain is one of the things that's important. And one of the things we see routinely here is it's still a swivel chair kill chain. So I think we need to work on some of those things. What I mean is it's still an L&O who's receiving the message and then asking for the fires, versus something that might be able to move much more faster with reliability. It's something we hadn't talked about. Parting thoughts is, we heard it today from, Colonel Trujillo was here from 1st Special Forces Command, and that moral imperative that commanders have to ensure that their unit is trained. What a great perspective from that senior leader. Think about it from that perspective, and I think everybody here at the combined training centers is thinking along those same lines. So you got a lot of people who are making it a moral imperative that your team company is going to leave here as well trained as possible. So that's what takes place here. So you win the first battle. Kelly, you got the last word.
Okay, I think the last words I would say about coming here to the National Training Center to train is what it's going to allow you to do is differentiate between, can I talk the talk, but can I also walk the walk? and it's going to give you a mirror to evaluate yourself in that process. And what I really mean is, if a unit comes here with a self-image of what it thinks it's capable of, it will be able to determine how accurate that image is, because the fact that the complexity of the scenario, that they're not the ones that designed it, they actually have to deliver what they are trying to do. And when they can't, it exposes that, which is a wonderful gift, because then that gives them an opportunity to correct or change or adjust or modify what it is that they're doing. And it will bring together a more accurate understanding of where they're actually at, which is invaluable.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for listening to Off the Radar, where RSOF prepares for conflict. Like, subscribe, and share on your listening platform.
Actions will determine the outcome.